So my name is Beth Huntley. I live at Bigbury-on-Sea, and when I heard that Phil and Joni were organising a thing called Big TV, I tried to work out how I could contribute, and I thought that maybe I could regale you with some tales of my own time working in even bigger TV than Big TV. If you don't want me to do this, this is fine. I shall stop, and if you do want me to do it, I shall continue and tell you maybe a different tale every day, or every once a week, or something like that, every time. So the one I thought I'd tell you about today is working with David Attenborough. I spent most of my life working on the same programs, and interestingly the same problems as he presented. And when I was about late 20s, I think I probably was, I was working on a series called The Living Planet, and the working title was Planet Earth. And I thought I'd just tell you about a very small, insignificant little incident that occurred, but nevertheless, it was David Attenborough that introduced me to Devon, and I just thought I'd tell you the tale of how that happened, really. So we were working on this series called The Living Planet, and I was working for the executive producer, and we had, our little team of 3 people had 4 programs to make between us. So we worked on The Sky Above, The Open Ocean, one on Rivers and Lakes, which was based around the Amazon, and what was the other one? Oh, Jungle, on the rainforest of the Amazon. So we were working on these programs, and we thought, what can we do that's really unusual, that's never been done before? We came up with this idea, which of course everybody does now, but back in the day it had never been done before, which was filming underwater and having our presenter talk to camera while he was underwater. I mean, this was completely unheard of, and everyone knew it was completely impossible. But we had found a rather good location. Very nice for the film crew, because it was in the Maldives. And off the Maldives, in the sea off the Maldives, there was some sharks, nurse sharks, which are sharks that don't harm you. But we knew that we could get David down amongst the nurse sharks, and they would swim around him. He would be speaking to camera, and we wanted him to actually be able to hear the words that he said. However, this was technologically impossible. So dear old Dickie Bird, who was our stunning sound recordist, well, not stunning, beautiful, but stunning as in really nice and really good at his job. He worked out how it could be done back in BBC Bristol, which is where all the wildlife programmes are made. But in order to test it, we had to go underwater somewhere, and we needed to go underwater somewhere that was confined, because we didn't want Attenborough swept out to sea or anything like that. So we came upon this place called Fort Bovisand, which is actually just the Bigbury side of Plymouth. And there was a big, deep diving pool there, and David could go down underwater and test this equipment, and we could see whether or not it would work while he was underwater. So that was the plan. So we set off one sunny day, and I was driving. David was in the front seat. We always had to hire a car. David Attenborough doesn't drive anyway, so he always had to be chauffeured everywhere, or take a taxi or something like that, because he's never driven all his life. Anyway, so I was driving, David was in the front seat, and then the producer and the sound man, Dickie and Adrian Warren, were in the back seat. We had a small little, I don't know, the equivalent of a little Clio or something like that. We came trotting down the motorway from the BBC in Bristol to Plymouth, and we arrived there, and we turned off to Fort Bovisand. Now, back in those days, it was an extremely bumpy, ruckety minuscule little track right down to this concrete pool that was right beside the sea. We were driving down this track, and another car was coming up, which didn't leave a lot of room for manoeuvre, and this other car went into us. So it wasn't a major accident or anything like that. So David says, leave it to me, gets out the car. poor driver of this other car, of course, suddenly sees David Attenborough walking towards him when he knows he's in the wrong. So David just I don't know what he actually said because I didn't hear, but he just had a quick word with him and took his name and registration address and all those kind of things you have to do when you've had an accident in a hire car and any damage done, you need to get back on the insurance. And then David got back in the car. We felt so sorry for this guy. One, because of the shock of seeing Attenborough get out when you really don't expect him driving along that tiny little track down to Fort Bovisand. And also the other thing we felt really sorry about was that he would go back to the pub tonight. He would tell all his mates, you'll never guess what happened to me during the day. I was driving up this lane, his car came down, we collided, and guess who got out? David Attenborough. And no one would believe him.